ladies and gentlemen. It is September 13th, 2010. This is Day 9 Daily 178, I think. I actually can't believe I'm going to do this. Yes, I had to go check my IRC window to make sure that was the correct number. I apparently have almost knocked my camera off yet again. But this is the Day 9 Daily where we learn to be a better gamer. In exciting non-Starcraft news, I am not excited about going to the dentist at some point, which is something I kind of need to do. Someone was actually just mentioning the dentist to me before I started this daily, and I realized how much I don't like going to the dentist because I don't like that guilt. They always try to make you feel bad about it. You know, you go in there and you know, you never see the dentist, right? He's just this, there's just some lady there who's wearing like ultra bright pastels, you know, and she's cleaning your teeth and she's just judging you quietly. It's just like, there's a lot of plaque here. Yeah, how often do you brush? And you do floss, don't you? And you're just like, ugh, color. And then the dentist comes in. He always has that surgical mask, like you have, you know, anthrax or something. He's just like looking at an X-ray. He's like, there's a cavity. And I mean, like, everyone's so disappointed in you. And you know what? I remember once I was like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. And I brushed my teeth like 4 times a day for a year and a half. And you know what happens when there's no cavities, and there's not a lot of plaque? When you're done, they just go, wasn't anything wrong. Go. Get out of here. Pay us first. You know, they don't care. If there's nothing, they're like, that's fine. That's okay. Good. If there's something wrong, they're just, they look at you like you're some idiot. And that'll never happen with another doctor. You'll never go to the doctor with a cold and they'll be like, your nose is runny. What are you doing, man? Do you not wash your hands ever? Like, they never do that. Instead, they say, we're going to give you a prescription to pills that you'll want to take even when you don't have a cold because they'll make you feel like you're in outer space. It makes me want to get a cold every Wednesday. I mean, seriously, dentists could learn a thing or two from the other doctors. Either way, we're going to be watching an extraordinarily epic game that I haven't seen. It's going to be Bratok versus Socke on my favorite map in the map set, Desert Oasis. Oh, what a sweet map. Let me just drink a little bit of water. The reason I like Desert Oasis is because it leads to very unusual games, and by that I mean that on the other maps, people have their standard little build orders down that they think they get, and they kind of do the same build on Temple or Metalopolis or Blistering Sands, but on Desert Oasis, uniqueness comes forth with or something. I also wanted to note that next Monday, exactly a week from today, is going to be Fun Day Monday, where you guys are going to submit to me replays of you playing Zerg and never getting a queen the whole game. 0 queens. None. Zippo on the queeno. And the idea is, I want to start putting some arbitrary constraints on your gameplay, so that way we can just kind of see what ends up happening. And I'm no doubt that there's going to be some very kooky games in there. And if you can, email it to day9monday@gmail.com. That is DAY9, the number, Monday@gmail.com. Send me your replays, and I'll select one juicy good one. So if it's like an 8-minute game, just play another one and submit as many as you want. But make sure the title says Fun Day Monday, 2-sentence description of what's in there, and no more, because I don't want to open up something that's like a 3-paragraph description of the replay that I just could have watched anyways. And don't be like, Day 9, I have a question. Is there any chance? Just deleted. In the trash. This guy's only watching replays for fun from that mailbox. Let's go ahead and bop into the game. I'm starting to talk like our good friend Guitorp. He likes to do clown bopping and such things. We have Bratok at the south position as the red Terran. And in the north, we have ATN Socke. And I always want to read that as, attention, Socke. You know, like it's a command. But this is a PvT on Desert Oasis. Obvious things that we are going to note, as we always do. Very wide open, spread open natural expansion. It even has like 2 entrances. And defending the natural expansion is tough because of this ramp that's so awkwardly placed. It's also a million years from your main. But it is an extremely long distance to the other natural. Very long by ground. And as we can just see by glancing at the minimap, very, very, very short by air. So we do have an extremely fast Rax by Bratok, very fast gas. Easy little timing if you throw down a Rax and then immediately throw down a refinery and you don't make any sort of SCVs in between, you will have just enough gas for a tech lab when the barracks finishes. And that's an obvious one at the start that probably a lot of people will note, but it's very fun to create more useful timings for yourself that you're just aware of, like how many tanks does it take for my +1 attack upgrade for the tanks to finish? If you can remember something like that, you just have so many little link-ups in your brain. Around the time you're making the third tank, you think to yourself, huh, I bet that upgrade is going to get close to done. See, we have just enough money to be able to throw down that tech lab. Bratok could have very well thrown down an orbital command. That is a possibility here, because note that if this supply depot doesn't get tossed down, we spend 150 on the orbital command, and then we'll still end up having enough money to construct a Reaper. But this variant I actually almost prefer, because I just don't like getting supply blocked very early on when you're doing this sort of fast Reaper semi-cheese-ish build. Meanwhile, in Socke's base, note the gateway is not even done yet, and he did build those at a reasonable time. There's the pylon on 16, of course, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing too extraordinary is going on right now. This build, I think people perceive it as a cheesy build, and the main reason people will perceive it as a cheesy build is that it feels very unsafe unless you do a good amount of damage. But on this map, because the distances are just so gigantic, it ends up being pretty reasonable opening. A lot of people used to send it back here first, but as we can see, they made a valley back here. So really, it's only this side part or this back part. So there's very obvious locations for it to be traveling. Here comes the Reaper marching up into the base. And I always like to just briefly glance over here to see when stuff is going on. The seemingly uninteresting stuff. This is where people really want to be looking at, but this is the obvious part. He's obviously going to be trying to pick off probes. I'm just looking around here. Is anything weird going on? I'm noticing a lot of gas. Is he going to try to get stim early? That would actually be way, way early in my eyes. He's just doing very good micro, trying to pick off the Zealot. And what I like is that when the Zealot falls back too far, he picks off probes. This is looking very, very gritty for the Protoss at this point in time. 3 kills already for that Reaper. It's tempting when you're running back to shoot at the Zealot, but I would almost prefer if he was still shooting at those probes when the Zealot was chasing. And it looks like the Zealot will end up falling, though. Yeah, I like that. Picking off some probes, and now finally the Stalker ends up popping out. Now, if we just go to the unit counting station, note that Protoss is not screwed by any means. He's definitely lost a lot of probes. I mean, this Reaper has 8 kills. But you'll note that Terran is also quite far behind on his own SCV count and only really has 1 barracks, and he's broke. This is why this build people consider to be very cheesy. If this were something like Steps of War, Bratok really would have needed to do a lot more damage. He would have needed to go in for the kill almost immediately. Oh, that sucks. The Zealot's walled in. That's one thing that I suppose annoys me more than anything about this game, is that there's really no cracks in between these buildings, so whoopsie daisies. Sometimes you have to martyr your own base. But on this particular map, Protoss, or again, if this were Steps of War, I really feel like Protoss could have been able to do some sort of counter-offensive, or at the very least been able to expand a little easily. This is a very late factory. There still is not that many units. Bratok looks like he's going for a refinery. Oh, that's so weird. Part of the reason I love Desert Oasis, and it looks like Stargate's going down. Oh, very, very good stuff. Very, very cool things occurring. Now, with any build, really, on this map, this is kind of true for other maps, but I would say especially it's true on Desert Oasis. You're going to kind of instinctually play defensively on that map. Ow, damn it, the green tea's still really hot. Yeah, I cooked green tea today, you guys. Woo, it's really good, but apparently I nuked the shit out of it. Because my tongue now tastes kind of like metallic. But with most builds, it should be do something cute and then expand. You can do Reaper Harass and then expand. In Terran vs. Protoss, you can do the Marine to Marauder and then Reaper push and then expand. That's the build that the Root Gaming folks have made very popular. You could do something in TVP like open up with a very fast Banshee with Cloak and try to harass. Or if you watch any of Into the Rainbow's games against Tester in the Racer King of the Beta, he would go to Starport Banshee. That's really aggressive. He'd be putting a lot of aggression on his opponent, but he would expand or make at very least make a command center while all this stuff was going on. It's a very good idea as Terran and Protoss to have that, do something else, and then expand. I'll leave Zerg out for now, but because we just have TNP in this game. So, I mean, I'm loving the fact that there's a Stargate coming out, but this really should be do a little something with the Stargate and then expand. And based upon this, we can kind of get the idea of, yeah, maybe you should be throwing down another Warp Gate, because that would allow us to maybe be a little more aggressive, but how would that help? we would have a really hard time pushing his front. It would be pretty obnoxious, and then what? I mean, you're completely shut down. So the Stargate is finished. I would almost assume a Void Ray is coming. We will find out when the pylon is done, and yeah, there's the Void Ray going down. Looks like Socke saved up a little bit of chrono boost. And you know, on any other map, again, this is part of the let's look at Desert Oasis differently from other maps. On any other map, this would be a seemingly ugly-looking composition for Socke. Most players would have gone for Warp Gate, would have been a little more comfortable. If you did this on Steps of War, you'd be kind of looking a little weird, and here's Socke is trying to waltz up the ramp. Yeah, I mean, not many units, 1 Zealot, 1 Stalker, 2 Stalker, and now a Void Ray. But because the attack distances by ground are so short, we can get away with this. And I would very much so like to see Socke do some kind of very, very cool expand coming up soon. Now, Bratok's doing something that looks very, very weird. He's going for a very fast Thor, but that's okay because he has a Thor drop plan. Thor drop in any matchup is actually quite good. Probably with the exception of Terran versus Terran, because they'll have Vikings. Now, the Void Ray is going for the Refinery. This is the obvious easy kill place on this map. This is really, if you're doing any harassment with flyers, whether it be a Banshee or a Void Ray, this should almost always be the first area you poke into. Don't get too greedy. If you have a Banshee doing this harassment, you can easily pick off a few SCVs mining gas, and of course, always best to pick off SCVs mining gas instead of SCVs mining minerals. And especially for a Void Ray, you have the Refinery here that you can easily charge up. Now here comes the Thor. Thors are actually really bad against Void Rays. They shoot slowly. You should pull that Void Ray back. They shoot really slowly, and they don't do too much damage at all. And now Bratok is going to be doing a Thor drop. Now, how many times have you seen a Thor drop against Protoss? Probably very, very few. That seems like an unusual thing. It looks like he's target firing the medevac. Will he be able to get the extra boost charge? Yep, there's the extra boost charge. Now he's going to whip around and fire at the Thor. I'm actually genuinely curious who ends up winning this battle. It looks like a Void Ray wins by a significant margin. Not something I actually knew. I didn't know a Void Ray wounded Thors so much. Anytime I see that sort of thing, I make a pause and a mental note of it. And how is Socke following up? Looks like he is getting a gateway. Ugh, I'm not the biggest fan of that. What does his gateway do? You can easily expand. Terran player has just lost a lot of ability to do much of anything at all. He just lost his Thor. He just lost his medevac. He'll be able to repel, but he won't really be able to aggress. So I do like that Terran is throwing down that command center. He's going to be absolutely fine. A Thor is devastating against almost anything ground-wise. All right, perfect. That's what we get for trying to make boxes when we are in a replay. Gamer, let me know if that pixel is off at all. So this is a very unorthodox situation we have ourselves in. We have the 1-1-1 style, and we're also getting a Thor. Wow, that's not something that we really see too much in the Protoss camp. I do not like this, getting the robotics facility. Build the expansion, Socke. Attention, Socke! Build the expansion. Seems like a lot more reasonable of a play. I'm going to ignore these for the time being and just obsess about the fact that there's no expo going down. How disappointing. Now, one thing that seems weird, a lot of people who start making Void Rays never stop making Void Rays, but a Void Ray plus 1 Phoenix turns out to be very, very effective. The fact that if there is some key unit you want to lock down with the Void Rays, you can do so. Also, the Phoenixes are very fast, so they can chase down this Viking. It makes it a little hard for the Viking to decide what he wants to do. God, Vikings, oh my god, Void Rays just demolish doors. That is not something I knew about. Ooh, that Marine is going to be the hero Marine of the day. The fact that he actually killed off that last final Void Ray. I would like to state for the record that there is no expansion going down yet. I'd also like to state for the record that this guy that was built so long ago has not really done anything, nor has this robotics bay. And this isn't me saying like, oh, Socke's a bad player. It's more of, that wasn't necessary now. It never was necessary. So we should have just been able to get an expansion up a lot earlier. This is something that you'll see happen a lot with all styles of play with all races, where you will get something, probably the first time you're doing a strategy. Here's a really easy example. First time you're doing like an early expand build in Protoss first, whatever. And you say to yourself, I'm just going to get 5 gateways. And you decide that, and it feels okay at the time because you're forgetting probes, because maybe you don't really expand that much. You're kind of forgetting to macro. Okay, cool. Now I'm able to build all these units, and then after a while, you might start to refine your play, and you realize, oh, if I make 4 gateways and I'm playing really, really on the money, I can make constant probes, and I can make out of all these gateways at the same time. And that's where most people stop. And there's nothing wrong with anything I've said right now, right? That seems reasonable. If I refine and refine and refine and refine and get to a place where I'm solid with my macro and solid with making the probes, I should be good, right? What people don't do that's very, very hard to notice, but I'm just going to throw it out there, is to say to themselves, well, did I really need this at any point here? I mean, for instance, like, let's take that 4 gatewaying Protoss player. He might start to rewatch replays and note that anytime someone pushes him, he smashes it violently. Like every single push that comes early to his expansion, he just crushes. And then he might realize, well, why am I getting 4 gateways? I could get away with 3 gateways, save that extra money, and then maybe tech a little earlier, or get another geyser, or get upgrades. It's that sort of thing that's very, very hard to perceive. So when I'm looking at this, if Socke had been constantly making out of these 2 gateways, his money would have been lower. He would have maybe been around 0 if he had made 3, 4 stalkers and done something with this RoboBay. It may have been at 0, and he may have convinced himself, because I am playing well, and by playing well I mean that he's not forgetting to macro. By playing well, he might convince himself that there was no capacity to throw down an early expansion. When of course there is, as we can see, it's going down right now. So another Void Ray being made. Sometimes this happens where you end up losing that key unit, like the Void Rays. You can't do any more harassment, and sometimes it's so important not to do it again. To do a really awesome analogy, if any of you have played Street Fighter 4 and you've ever tried to do an uppercut, if you've ever tried to do that and messed up, your hand's instinct is, well, I better just try again. And then your opponent kind of sees you just like doing that stupid looking flinch, and he's like, oh, he's just trying to uppercut, and it'll punish you as a result. Your brain just wants to execute it properly once. So when the Void Ray dies, a lot of times people will just kind of go, another Void Ray. Might not be the best. On this map, I don't mind it at all. On this map, I don't mind it. But I particularly see this happen with players who go Banshees. They'll lose the first Banshee, and they'll be like, oh, damn it. Let's try again. And then by this time, you know, if the first Banshee didn't work well because of some misclick, they're going to be prepared for a second Banshee. Some very nice control by Bratok. And really, if Socke just kills off these 2 gas geysers and doesn't go in for anything more juicy, he'll still be in a fantastic position and a great, great, great lead. Really killing off these gas geysers shuts down medevac production, shuts down upgrades, shuts down tons and tons and oodles and oodles. So I really genuinely like taking out these gas geysers. Socke has finished. Now we have a little bit of a funky spot because we're hitting the mid game, and I always think that this is the most important thing to think about in any single anything, really. You just should always think about your friggin' mid game. What do you want to do? Do you want to do big blink stalker play? It looks like that is up his sleeve. We have a forge going down. I'm trying to get a sense of what he wants to be doing in his mid game. Here comes some nice pushing. Looks like he will almost be able to kill off a medevac. Oh no, he is not able to kill off a medevac. I'm still trying to look around. What does he want to do for his mid game? What does he want to do? It looks like Zealot with leg speed. That is quite odd. I'm going to back up a little bit. And share with you the tragic tale of me laddering today. I lost 9 games in a row. Yay! And then I said, time for a daily. So actually, I don't know if it's still here. It's somewhere in my room. I was actually playing in my USC esports shirt, which is a gray shirt. And I don't know if you know this, but you should never exercise in a gray shirt, because if you sweat, it turns black, like your soul is bleeding out onto your shirt. And that's what it looked like for me, because I'd gamed for quite a long time. And part of the reason why I was losing all these games is that it's so easy to have tunnel vision on the one thing you're working on that you forget about your overarching plan. So, for instance, let's say you're the Zerg player and you're having trouble against that big Mass Reaper opening. Almost reminds me of a game I played today. having trouble against that Mass Reaper opening. So you get so tunnel visioned in on, okay, so I'm going to time it like this, and then I'm going to get the roaches out like this, and I'm going to spread my creep out really well, and I'm going to shut down all of it. All right, awesome, great. And then you hold it off, and you're like, yeah, oh, shit. I don't know what to do. And then you slowly start to kind of, oh, well, maybe I should do this. And you'll watch your play just sort of tumble down. So what's so important is that you just have a good, solid mid-game plan, because if, for instance, I said to myself, I really want to have a really solid economy, a lot of Zerglings and Roaches, and I want to start Nidus worming him. Like, I want 3 hatches between my main and my natural, and I want 2 queens just making a lot of units, and I want to be Nidus worming him as I expand more. That's just a solid technique to be going for, cool, but if I forgot, because I wasn't thinking too much because I was having too much tunnel vision, you end up with this awkwardness. Like in Socke's play, I'm seeing that there was a lot of cool effectiveness that happened in that Phoenix Void Ray action, but at this stage I'm kind of wondering about the Zealot with leg speed. I always want to think about some eventual goal. For Terran, it could be I want to go for a relatively big ground force and do a lot of stuff with medevacs, and I want to expand like crazy. I want to expand like crazy much. Uh-oh. Ooh, ouch. Always a good thing. Now, Phoenixes could be part of the mid-game plan. I want to expand, and I want to be just racking up a lot of Phoenixes. That is a reasonable part of the mid-game plan. I also want to be heading for Templar. Great. That seems good. I am concerned about the fact that Hellions can easily do a lot of damage here. A Reaper probably is not going to do a lot of damage. Well, I guess the Phoenixes can cover that pretty well. Zealot, it's just the Zealot with leg speed is feeling a little bit odd to me, because on 2 warp gates, you're going to have like 6 Zealots. I would have preferred to get the Templar a lot faster, or maybe even gotten Blink with the Stalkers so we could do some acute action with them. Be careful with your Phoenixes. I think that's an understandable mistake. I'm just wincing because I have felt that exact pain before. Good spread by Socke on this stage. And Bratok, I think, is like the master of the early-ish push in all matchups, really. Because I just want to note this little look right here. He has 2 bases, and he has a very fast starport, just making medevacs one at a time. I have noticed this with my own play. Actually, I was watching my own replays yesterday to try to improve, just try to find little leaks, and I was kind of noticing that I wasn't doing anything gently. Like if I wanted to get medevacs, I would always be double starport churning out medevacs, and that would end up being kind of late. I would always be going for like double Evo chamber, like huge upgrades. I would never get like a Evo chamber. It kind of starts some upgrades. I would never get like 1 very fast starport and just gently push out the medevacs so I could be aggressive. I was going way too much into the heavy-fisted sort of action, and this definitely eats into your ability to do cute pushes in the mid-game. And here we see Bratok just doing a wonderful, wonderful little push. Needs to be careful because feedback is brutal. Alright, he did manage to repel it. Looks like Socke has played this map quite a bit. Clearly knows the obnoxiousness that is dropping. Seriously, dropping is very, very, very tough to deal with. And these Phoenixes are still kind of marching around. I actually think that maybe we should continue to make Phoenixes in the mid-game stages, because Phoenixes are very good at just backing up your army, doing little things like this, picking off some medevac wandering out, and then we can pick up these Marines, just get some more free kills. A very easy drop cleanup unit, and we might even be able to pick up a Marauder, but because they are not light on the damage, light on the armor type, can't really do too much damage to them. Some more just gentle little harassment. Be a little careful with those Phoenixes, obviously. That pretty much goes without saying. Bratok also continuing to just gently transition. He's continuing to make out of these. He's not going to be doing any sort of crazy slamming out 15 barracks action, just getting 1 medevac at a time and slowly pushing out. So at this point, I'm starting to feel a little bit concerned for Socke's well-being here, as he is... he has a very solid army. This isn't like a bad army by any means, but it just feels like it's going to suffer from a lack of mobility. The army's having to do these long, drawn-out paths along the edges. And Bratok, who again is a very good player, could just lift up and go ahead and drop right now. And if this has ever happened to you as Protoss, where you get caught off on a production cycle, like you warp in 6 Stalkers here and then he drops, you just want to like put a bullet in your head. It's just the most terrible, terrible feeling. More upgrades coming out, and ooh, I'm liking this expansion. In general, I don't think a lot of people think much about the way that the second to third base feel should go. People talk mainly about how the 1 to 2 base feel should go. So you see people just talk about a straight early expand. You'll hear me talk about doing something like a queued opening followed by an early expand, you know, like pushing with double Hellion and then getting a command center, something like that. But I like this look for Bratok for taking a third. Because in this case, you still haven't really gone into super power-up mode. So for me, what would kind of look like a powery army for Terran would be like 5 or 6 barracks and a starport with the reactors. You can get a lot of medevacs. You can get a lot of Vikings to deal with the Colossus. You have 6 barracks. You can get tons of Marauders and Marines. And that sort of style I would like on a map like Blistering Sands, because it's so insanely, incredibly difficult to take a third base on that map. But on a map like Desert Oasis, where it's a little easier to take a third, because the attack distances are kind of far away, you could do something like what Bratok does, where it's like 5 barracks, but not really that... He doesn't really have the tech lab or the reactor yet, and he has a starport without the add-on, and he just has 1 engineering bay. And then when he takes this, that's when he can add on the second engineering bay. That's when he can really begin the big macro mode with the starports and all this jazz. And there's little things to note, like the fact that, wow, Socke does have 20 additional food, but note that this army had to take such a long time to get there that there's already units that are way back here that haven't really been able to join into the fray. So some nice storming action. And there's the money EMP that's going to shut down all sorts of aggression. This is why people are actually preferring to get the Colossus or just the Archon and Speed Zealot against this Marine Ball, because it's just so annoying to be ghosted. And I do like that ghost technique, because this is a nice addition that's going to not necessitate huge numbers of barracks. It's just a nice little subtle change. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Having that 1 starport without the reactor, gently getting a couple of medevacs so we can maybe do some drops early on, and then getting a Ghost Academy so we can bolster our army while getting an expansion. It's working oh so well. But of course, one storm is enough to end all that. So Socke is looking to be in a commanding lead. So I do know that this game is super friggin' long, so I'm definitely curious to see how Bratok ends up making his way out of this. And I love this engineering bay being very, very active. So common to see a player build an engineering bay, get the +1 very fast based upon his little early expand build, and then to forget that he's ever built an engineering bay in his whole life. That is a very, very common thing. But of course, just gentle little, just slowly getting upgrades, slowly getting air units, and eventually incorporating in ghosts. This is very hard to do if you are in the power 2 base mode and are just macroing with all your money. Likewise, Socke is a nice transition. This is, it sounds like, it does seem like a lot of players do tend to forget this, but anytime you're doing a big warp gate mid-game, a good late-game transition is to just start building warp prisms. That sounds weird because people like the idea of just throwing in a warp prism. Like, oh yeah, if you have gateways, make a warp prism. But I want you to just hear how that sounds in the mid-game, getting a lot of gateway units, and then later on, going up to the warp prism. Because later on, the army's going to be spread out a lot. It's this timing that makes the warp prism so strong, and the fact that he really is quite spread out. Of course, if you have 1,000,001 SCVs repairing a planetary fortress, it's not going to do too much good, but of course, once we get the charge going, it is going to be very tough for this to stay alive. A little bit of disorganization. Another great EMP there. Trying to recluster, trying to get off the good shots, but that's part of the reason why you should always make an excess of ghosts. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't always need to make an excessive ghost, but it's part of the reason why I like that Bratok kind of spammed them, because they are good just as a general unit to do the damage. I definitely think they're one of the more underused units, and definitely do a little bit more feedbacking. I think would be super strong, but just like Bratok, oh my goodness, it's going to be able to hold it. Reopening that resource menu. Wow, Bratok pulled way ahead here. I actually don't like the fact that this warp prism is over here. I would prefer the warp prism here, because if we're attacking at the front and we're warp prisming in the middle of the map somewhere, it's a lot less effective. Warp prisming in the back where he just doesn't want to have his focus. That's what's really juicy. And of course, Zealots in small numbers are never good against this Marine Marauder pack. We do have that gold expansion up by Socke. And this is, again, why I love talking about what is your mid-game plan? What is the core focus army? Because after you've taken a loss like that, you still need to have some core base direction that you want to be going in. I don't see any reason for him to transition to some sort of super crazy late game tactic because he doesn't really have any units. I'm actually kind of surprised. Looks like he has 6 Zealots and 3 Templar. Yeah. And Bratok is continuing to just macro very hard. Now, a lot of times what happens, you can get you can limit the number of barracks you have, just like stop at 6 or 7 on 3 bases, and begin expanding a lot. That's a very Korean style, to just go into crazy macro mode. You almost treat yourself like you're playing Zerg in Starcraft 1, where you just start expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding like crazy, and then you end up just tossing huge amounts of units at your opponent. Good example of the big macro style, Chthon Luck versus Huck Game 1. At the MLG winners bracket. That was casted, so you should check that out at mlgpro.com. Does look like we have a little transition to a fleet beacon. I do not know if that's going to be a mothership or not. If it was, I would be the happiest camper in the universe. Otherwise, carrier seems pretty raisonnable. So I'm going to start thinking, oh, whoops, engineering bay, not doing much. Would like to see that. Okay, cloak. This is... I would call this like a mission-critical upgrade in the later stages of the game. Using that cloak so you can advance forward and kill off any Templar with a snipe upgrade. This is a very smart rally point to have all your stuff at. We can see that everything is, of course, directed up here. These little small, tiny forces that are advancing forward are kind of cool. Whoa, hey, I'm the best, but I'm doing it daily. Thanks, crunch time. So... I'm actually very interested by the style that I think we're seeing come out of Socke, where he doesn't really appear to be making that many units. I'm actually just looking at the production tab. He has a lot of Zealots, and it looks like he is kind of walking them across the map, but I don't see any Stalkers. I don't see anything else. It looks largely like he's playing a little bit defensively, just throwing down storms and using small numbers of Zealots to clean up and making a lot of cannons. Look how far forward these cannons are. It's actually quite unusual. Looks like he'll barely be able to defend this. Oh, maybe with his auto turrets are doing a lot of damage. Ghosts doing a little bit of snipe on the Zealots. Never forget about that. People tend to treat Ghosts as just the anti-spellcaster type of unit. Zealots warping in. What I'm starting to think here, that why I'm sort of pausing, kind of going, is that Socke seems to be not making any of what I call the core units, the Zealots and the Stalkers. Those are the units that just sort of fit nice with your army and just deal a good amount of damage. They're not like power units like Templar or Colossi or anything like that. But in Brood War, there were always these styles of play you could do that just were very, very strong defensively to allow you to set up to do something else. So, for instance, in Brood War, you would have, like, the Corsair Reaver style, where you would build lots of cannons, and you'd plant your Reavers down at your expansions, and that was kind of impenetrable. And then you'd try to do a little harassment, but the most important part was that Zerg couldn't bust you. Or in Zerg vs. Protoss, burrowing lurkers and tons of sunken colonies and spore colonies at the front of your bases, and that was really, really hard for Protoss to break. And the most obvious example... Dark Swarm and Lurkers and Brood War. You will never kill this expansion, period. I mean, that is very, very obvious. I'm just focusing on defense style. But we haven't really seen too much of that in StarCraft 2. We haven't seen any real, like, I'm going to try to expand very thinly, and then I'm going to try to just defend it with cute units. Templar seem to be doing something equivalent to that, but I'm wondering if there is maybe some way that we could do that. I'm seeing Socke just play very, very, very non-gateway unit oriented all of a sudden. And I'm trying to see if there's some sort of cool way that he could be expanding this. But either way, it looks like this fleet beacon was made just to get the flux veins. That is the speed upgrade for the void rays. Oh, okay, cool. This is very similar to the warp prism that you heard me say. I really like just warping in a bunch of units in the back of his base. But look at how effective just a few warp prisms are. You heard me say so many times at the start that these refineries are a really good place to hit because you can charge up. That's going to be true all game long. These sort of Void Ray tactics are very difficult to execute on other maps, but on this map, looks good. And actually, what's something cute that Noni told me, if you cluster a bunch of Void Rays, like click them together and then hit Patrol directly underneath it, you get like this clustered death ball of Void Rays, where the Void Rays stay super, super tightly packed and just kill anything within a nearby radius. Have to be super careful with those Marines in the center of the map, but this is, okay, so now we're starting to back up. I guess Socke just had a little bit of weakness after that early push died. I was wondering where this big gateway army went off to, and now it looks like it's back. Oh, we're starting to see the effectiveness of that cloak upgrade, why it is so popular, and why, really, it should be very popular. It's just very, very strong, but Bratok, I'm a little concerned about how high that money is. We really could have thrown down more racks, or at the very least done another expansion. Bratok is very good at the small push style, but I would have liked to see a transition to kind of like a bigger mass crushing army style, because you can only win so many games with cute early pushes. Generally, they give you advantages and sometimes win, but you really need to almost always have some big mass macro follow-up, unless you're obviously cheesing, unless that is the very clearly declared purpose of your build. And God, this ghost is being so awesome. I think that is just very, very fancy. So it looks like we kind of have ourselves in a little bit of a deadlock position, because it's getting a little bit hard to take a fourth. And an idea I want to throw at you is taking this as a fourth base for Protoss, because I think this left flank is pretty damn hard to have a whole army wander all the way up to our main. This is probably the most concerning area of the map, and if we take this, it's the very simple logic that the aggressor can move between the two bases, this one at the right and this one up top, relatively easily because those positions are so close. But if you're the defender, this is a much more awkward, much longer path to take, and you have to do a lot of guesswork. So this expansion is actually a little bit tough to take later on. But either way, Socke doesn't look like he is getting an expansion anytime soon. He's just going to continue to do this sort of harassment. He's going to be pushing here at the same time. Oh, yeah! Taking that as a fourth base. Very, very sexy. Now advancing into the main. This is just so awesome. On a lot of other maps, this wouldn't work because our opponent would be super duper close to us. And in the very close positions, you kind of need to worry about having very evenly matched army sizes. But because you have such a long period of time in which your opponent's trying to get to you, or in which your opponent is not watching his army and getting everything stormed to ship, you do have the advantage to have your Void Rays do a lot of damage in the back. What a very cool tactic by Socke. If any of you haven't seen Socke versus Red on Temple, I definitely recommend that game. That is some more amazing decision-making going down. Boy, that's sexy PTOS player. So now I think, obviously, Bratok is not particularly happy with the position he is in. I'm very interested in this photon cannon placement. The more you start getting like timing of builds down, you're starting to feel very comfortable with the fundamentals. It's these little things like spreading the cannons out like this that I'm starting to realize cover a lot of area against those ghosts. Make it very, very easy to deal with if they're trying to do any sort of stuff like that. Ooh, Bratok rebuilding a ton of barracks, but I think this is the very clear location where we actually do want to build those racks, because this area is losing its importance as an area to defend. There's not going to really be any resources here. The only reason we want to stay behind is there are buildings. That's why the main stays relevant all game long, because it has all these vital tech structures in it. But if you are in some sort of emergency, I would build farther and farther out into your like your tertiary bases. And Socke very smartly taking this bottom right expansion, because the more he ends up curling around and pushing into this bottom area, the safer this expansion becomes. It just even looks safe with all this action going on here. Void Rays floating off doing their own thing. Command center really should be moving out to this, probably his top left area. This is kind of pushing it. If all these barracks here were actually up here, I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. Now I want you to note that Bratok suddenly has 7 barracks. This is more barracks than he had early on in the game. Way more than he had early on in the game. I would have liked to see this kind of thing happen sooner. And Bratok is also doing a very interesting thing. He's completely cut Marauders out of his force. Like, totally. There are absolutely no Marauders in this mix at all. And really, once you start seeing the Templar, that's generally a good sign that there are not any Colossi coming anytime soon. And Marauders really are the damage-dealing units. Excuse me, the Marines really are the damage-dealing units. So that's actually kind of a cool logic that Bratok's doing. He's just making tons and tons and tons of Ghosts and Marines. And I'm actually very surprised at the amount of Ghosts he's making. Look at this. He's just, like, massing Ghosts. Which is also interesting to me, because Zealots are light, so Ghosts tend to chew through them pretty well, and it's just Marines against Stalkers, and that's not going to be too close. Void Rays are awesome. They're being strong all game long. And I'm also starting to realize that on this map, the Stargate can be good all game long. First, we do Void Ray pushes at the outset. I just want to think about the lifetime of that one building. First, we do Void Ray pushes at the outset to try to mess with them. Then we start getting a lot of Phoenixes because Phoenixes are so fast. You can do so much spotting. You can pick off the medevacs, all that sort of stuff, while you're kind of low on unit count. And then later on, getting the Void Rays for harassment. That's awesome. That's so cool. I actually did a podcast for Starcraft Brood War called Redundancy and Purpose. The idea of you make a building, it serves an immediate purpose, or else you probably wouldn't have built it, but how do you extend its purpose over time? A lot of times you'll see someone in Terran vs. Protoss just want to go Marine, Marauder, Medevac. It's fine. So they will build the factory, and then they'll just scout with it. If you don't scout with it, you're not really making too much use out of that factory. It kind of loses its purpose really quickly. So we do see, obviously, tons of people loving their Void Ray rushes, and then they can get their expansions up, but we can see on this map how versatile this is becoming. Oh my gosh, so awesome. And also, you heard me talk about why it's a good late game transition to get Warp Prisms. Same logic. We get the robotics facility early on for the observers because we do need to worry about Cloak pretty much always. But then we want to get the Warp Prism because we want to make use of our darling little robotics facility, and it integrates quite well with the rest of our force. Some more storms coming up. You can kind of just take it with the storm, just try to out-micro it. As long as you keep these medevacs in the back and you're very, very careful with them. So here comes a miracle walk around. Looks like the Marines did take the long path around. Templar getting what? Oh, yes. Attention, Socke. You're the man. That is totally kick-ass. I love that. Getting the mothership. Again, keeping purpose of that Stargate, not only to help reinforce our army, but to also be awesome. Also be very, very, very awesome. Huge Void Ray number. And I'm starting to see that those Flux Veins are actually helping us out quite a bit. So sweet. Oh, yes. I think what's kind of funny is a lot of Terran players are having tons of trouble against Protosses nowadays. In fact, many Terrans are just like, oh, Protoss needs to be nerfed for this reason or for that. And it's kind of interesting that really what Socke has been doing all game long is he's only done one direct push. He's done mainly harassment at the back and tried to set up expansions of his own. I like that. I think that's very, very smart. Because as we can clearly see, Bratok has had a very hard time taking yet another base. Ooh, Void Rays. Gotta be very careful with them. Never engage. Clustered Marine balls with them. Just continuing to warp in the Templar and getting the mothership. Oh yes, storming onto a Vortex is still an awesome build. And this expansion by Socke, it's kind of in a dangerous spot. It's in obviously a very vulnerable location. I mean, a few units just walk up here and it's just done. But still, when you're low on money and you have a ton of probes, yeah, I mean, you're just going to want to expand. I don't know why Socke's pushing there. I do not absolutely have any idea at all why that was going on. In small numbers, really the Marines and the Medevacs want all the Protosses to get in small numbers. This is in large numbers things start to get a little bit ugly. Large numbers we really, really hate. Looks like we're just going to have a mining festival. BYO, I guess, mining base here. He's just trying to warp in more Templar, obviously to defend. But I think that if Socke had just taken a more defensive stance with this, instead of trying to push with those units, he'd be in great shape. I mean, there's a lot of great starvation builds for Zerg, where you just kind of take the whole map, goop up the whole map with creep. And then you eventually wait for your opponent to just not have enough money to really do anything. And here, I think that this is an acceptable general technique for Protoss. You have the Void Rays trying to harass everything they can. You have the Void Rays also picking off any orbital commands. You just are warping in a lot of Zealots and Templar for Storm. And that's the way you end up playing. I think that's great. Oh my god, that was so awesome. And by the way, I love that the Zealots wandered into the Vortex. That way when they pop up, they immediately get the hit off. Super duper sweet. Looks like he really wants to kill off that Raven. Oh no, he lost the Mothership. I still wish the Mothership had that wormhole upgrade. But yeah, see, it's a touch disappointing that this expansion's probably going to end up falling. Look at Bratok just making Marines. Lots and lots and lots of Marines. Marines and Ghosts and Ravens, just the cutesy units, has been so good about getting all those upgrades all game long. And this might be the one savior for Bratok. If Bratok wins this game, my mind's going to be blown. As we can see, Bratok is at 49 food, but Marines work well in small numbers. Everything's in kind of small numbers. If we even look at the unit counting station, 50 of that food is probes, so they basically have the same army size. That's kind of funny. That gives me the good old giggle as I look about. Oh, jeez, more counter dropping. This is what Bratok is known for, is these aggressive little pokes. And Socke is starting, I think, to realize, wow, if I had just stayed back, I would have been in a lot better shape. Put guys in gas, put guys in gas. I'm most interested by Socke's play, as you've probably seen. This is my first viewing on this game. This is my first time I've checked this one out. And just the fact that this Stargate is doing so much good all game long is just being awesome to me. And also, forward cannons, very important if you're doing some sort of defensive gateway style, because you want to have space to warp in behind. So commonly, you want to just keep them nice and tucked and close to your main, because you want to be able to deal with drops. But hell, if you're able to warp in High Templar to Storm, or even to feed back any sort of Banshees, don't forget that feedback rapes Banshees. That is awesome. Wow. Wow, I actually think that Socke is going to win this game. If anyone wins this game, that's going to be awesome. I mean, this is a hell of a game. Hiding the command center. But man, just look at the minimap. Just these 3 bases. Just 3 bases. Cool starvation style by Socke. I love the idea of taking this and then being real aggressive as we push towards this and using the Void Rays. Oh, I love that Void Ray harass laking. That's so cool. Trying to do some good EMPs. More High Templar being warped in. Oh, all it takes is 1 storm. Oh, all it takes is 2 storms to do the serious damage. And, oh, yep, here's the big counter push. And I think that Bratok is going to have to type out pretty soon here, as he has 13 minerals and can't really do anything else. Socke has really been making a big name for himself as of late. And there's the good game. Holy friggin' crap. But I would like to note that even though that game was long and intense and dramatic, you hear me talk a lot about refinement of build orders, refinement of just sort of constantly repeating a build and all that stuff. People always want to improve the timing of just when they're building their structures so they are playing optimally. But there's also that refinement of decision making. Like in that game, over time, I was starting to realize that where Socke was really looking the strongest is when he was defending and denying expansions. And when he looked weakest is whenever he did pushes. There were a number of pushes along that bottom lane that didn't do so well. Remember that push that occurred over here when the Warp Prism was there and there were a lot of units pushing at the front over here? That didn't work out very well. But all the harassment worked out awesome. So I'm kind of just like, wow. Now we can start to have a slightly more refined game next time, and the game could be a lot shorter and the wins could be a lot more dominant for the Protoss pieces. I am going to take just 2 questions. Only 2, because this was a long one. Yeah, Helson631 says, Bratok basically abandoned using drops after his first one was unsuccessful. Do you think that he should have tried to do a few more drops, helping to ease the pressure when Socke was pushing him, seeing as Socke was very spread out? Yeah, I definitely think that... as counterintuitive as this sounds, with a lot of these really ultra defensive styles, you should try to push it and try to find a lot of holes in the defense. Because let's just think about 2 scenarios. If I am playing ultra defensive Protoss style, just trying to make cannons and warp and Templar and trying to harass you, if I'm not expanding a lot, you can just expand a ton, and there's nothing I can do about it because I'm playing defensively. But if you're doing what Socke is doing, and you're trying to defend and expand a lot, what the one issue that Socke is going to have is just not having enough defense. people who are doing this defensive style are intentionally spreading themselves very, very thin, as Helson noted. So I do think that doing a few more drops, and in particular splitting up his army, could have been quite a bit more useful. I just think that Marauder drops are really, really strong. And I want to note that there are ways to force this to work. I'm just going to briefly back up the replay. I'm still going to leave it paused, but like when Bratok is pushing through here towards this way, right when you're here, cut up with 2 medevacs and drop, and then pull the medevacs back. There are ways to force dropships to work. In the early Brood War days, people used to, people realized that the 7 Marine 1 medic drop was awesome. And then people kind of started scourging it, so people stopped dropping. And then you got players like Flash who just forced the dropships to work by constantly defending the paths. Fantasy is also really, really good at this. And I think it's so hard in the moment to make that decision as Bratok. In the moment, you're just like, yeah, I can push this and I can win. Yeah, I can push this and I can win. All right, oh, it didn't work. Uh-oh, gotta regroup. Oh, he looks weak. Maybe I can push that and I can win. It's kind of after the fact that you really have to reanalyze and go, yeah, you know what? Overall, I think that drops could have been a little bit more important in there. And I can't emphasize the importance of rewatching the damn replays that you lose. All 9 of the games that I lost, I rewatched all of them in a chunk. It hurt. But I learned one very important thing every single game. Very, very, very awesome. Very awesome. Gonna do one more question. One more question. Nithix has an interesting question. He says, do you think it was worth it for Bratok to cut Marauders completely? I understand Marines dish out the most damage, but those small Marine forces were always being stormed to death. That is actually a really tough one. That is such a hard question. The reason it's a hard question is that Marauders don't actually work that well in small numbers. Like once Protoss gets like 7 or 8 gateways and they can make a ton of Templar and a ton of Zealots, the Marauders kind of lose their goodness. If you can do something like expand 3 times fast as Terran and then make tons of Marauders, because the Marauders are so fast and so mobile, you can pretty much deal with whatever's thrown at you because you're always going to be against basically a smaller number. The one thing I think Bratok probably... Shit. I don't know. I don't know. I would have to do a lot of testing on that because I'm very unfamiliar with this idea of no more Marauders anymore, just Marines and Ghosts and Medevacs. That's definitely a new one to me. Definitely a very new one to me. I'm actually going to take a minute to think about that. I'm going to wrap up the daily after that question. What do I think about that? I guess the more I think about it, I'm starting to realize those Void Rays were really scary. The Marines can deal with that pretty well. Damn. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe getting a few Marauders in that mix would have been helpful. I'd kind of have to be in Bradok's shoes. I focused a lot on what Socke was doing just because I was more interested in it at the time. I really would have to go look at how his money was behaving, most importantly. I guess this is what I would say. Because it's really close, it's something that you should kind of test, and this is going to probably take hundreds of games to get right, like when should you do it, unless something really obvious is eluding me. But I want you to note how good the transitioning was by Bratok. That he got the barracks with the tech labs early on to make the Marauders he needed. And then, after he got the Ghost Academy, almost all the barracks with tech labs were just making Ghosts. And occasionally making Marines, but largely making Ghosts. That is very clever transitioning. Most people do something like they get a bunch of barracks to make Marines with, and then get Tech Lab add-ons to make Marauders. They end up transitioning into the Marauders, but I like to transition out of Marauders that Bratok did. I think that's cool. So that's going to wrap up the daily for today. I wanted again to say, send your replays. If you playing with no queens at all, send them to day9monday@gmail.com. Day9monday. Zerg, no queen play. Just making a goofy constraint on you because we want to see what sorts of cool games come up. We'll be cast next Monday on Fun Day Monday. I'm out. Peace. See ya. Ba-da-da-dum-dum-dum-da-da. Da-da-da-da-dun-dun-dun-dun. Stopping my recording. Da-dun-dun.